You know when life hands you a problem, and then offers the solution in an expensive suit with a look that says, "Don't argue with me." She needed a miracle. She got a dangerously convincing man instead. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital corridor stretched endlessly before Fiona Langley, each one blurring into the next. She pressed her palm against the cool wall, trying to anchor herself to something solid. 48 hours. That's how long she'd been awake, moving between the uncomfortable chair beside her brother's bed and the vending machines that had become her only source of sustenance. The pediatric cardiologist's words still echoed in her mind, clinical and devastating. Advanced intervention, specialized treatment, six-figure costs. Words that felt like bricks stacking on her chest, making it harder to breathe with each passing minute. Fiona blinked hard, willing her vision to clear. The small floriculture shop she'd inherited from her parents barely covered rent and groceries. The savings account she'd been building for years wouldn't cover even a fraction of what Jamie needed. Her baby brother, 10 years old with eyes too wise for his age and a heart that refused to beat properly, needed a miracle she couldn't afford. The floor tilted beneath her feet. She reached for the wall again, but her fingers met only air. The world spun, fluorescent lights becoming shooting stars across her darkening vision. Her knees buckled, and she felt herself falling, waiting for the harsh impact of the linoleum floor. It never came. Strong arms caught her mid-fall, pulling her against a solid chest. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with something woodsy wrapped around her as everything faded to black. Everett Kingsley had perfected the art of controlling his environment. As a federal judge, control wasn't just necessary, it was fundamental. Every decision measured, every word calculated, every emotion locked behind an impenetrable wall he'd built brick by brick over the years. Yet somehow, a woman collapsing in a hospital corridor had shattered that control in an instant. He'd been leaving the administrative wing after a meeting with the hospital's legal team regarding a case when he saw her. Slight frame swaying, pale hand reaching for support that wasn't there. His body moved before his mind could issue the command, long strides eating up the distance between them just as her legs gave out. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. The weight of her in his arms felt simultaneously substantial and fragile. Everett looked down at the woman cradled against his chest, noting the dark circles beneath her closed eyes, the exhaustion etched into features that even unconscious carried a certain delicate beauty. Her hair, a rich chestnut brown, had escaped whatever she'd used to tie it back, and without thinking he adjusted his hold to support her head more comfortably. "Someone get a doctor," he commanded, his courtroom voice cutting through the ambient noise of the hospital. Nurses materialized instantly, their practiced efficiency a blur around him. "Sir, we can take her." "I have her." The words came out harsher than intended. Everett didn't examine why he refused to release her to the medical staff. "Which room?" They directed him to an emergency examination room, and he carried her there with a care that contradicted his usual brusque manner. Laying her on the bed felt wrong somehow, as if he were abandoning a responsibility he'd somehow acquired the moment he caught her. The doctor's examination was swift. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, low blood sugar. The prescription was simple: rest, fluids, proper meals. Everett stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching as they inserted an IV into her pale arm. He should leave. Had no reason to stay. Didn't even know this woman's name. He stayed anyway. When her eyes finally fluttered open 20 minutes later, they were the color of warm honey shot through with flecks of green. They focused on him with an expression of confusion that slowly morphed into mortified awareness. "You—" Her voice came out raspy, and she immediately tried to sit up. The IV line stopped her, and Everett moved forward instinctively, one hand raised in a calming gesture. "Easy. You fainted. The doctor says you'll be fine, but you need to rest." She stared at him as if he'd materialized from thin air. "You caught me." It wasn't a question, but Everett nodded anyway. Would have been a hard fall otherwise. Pink color bloomed across her cheeks, making her look more alive than the ghostly pale she'd been moments before. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Thank you. You didn't have to." She pressed her lips together, cutting off the rambling words. Something about that small gesture, the way she bit her lower lip to stop herself from talking, made Everett's chest tighten in a way he didn't recognize. He cleared his throat, adjusting the collar of his shirt, a habit he'd developed when uncomfortable. "When did you last eat?" he asked, deflecting from her gratitude because he didn't know how to handle the warmth in those honey-colored eyes. Yesterday? Maybe?" She looked genuinely uncertain. "Yesterday, maybe," he repeated, disapproval heavy in his tone. "And sleep? That's a bit more complicated." She glanced toward the door, worry creasing her forehead. "My brother. He's upstairs in pediatric cardiology, and I can't leave him alone. And the chair isn't exactly comfortable, but it's fine, I'm fine, I just stood up too fast." Everett recognized deflection when he heard it. Years on the bench had made him an expert in reading between the lines, seeing the truth people tried to hide. This woman, whoever she was drowning. And for reasons he couldn't explain even to himself, he felt a fierce, sudden need to throw her a lifeline. Without a word, he reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate. Too intimate for strangers, but his hand moved of its own accord. She froze, her breath catching audibly. Their eyes met, held. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition of a sort that had nothing to do with prior acquaintance, and everything to do with souls calling to souls across an impossible divide. Everett pulled his hand back, clearing his throat again. "Rest. I'll make sure someone checks on your brother." Before she could protest, before he could question what the hell he was doing, he walked out of the room, his heart beating with an unfamiliar rhythm that felt dangerously close to hope. Fiona watched the stranger disappear through the doorway, her heart still racing from that simple, devastating gesture, his fingers brushing her temple as he tucked her hair back. She touched the spot where his hand had been, feeling the warmth that lingered on her skin like a brand. Who was he? And why did the brief moment of his touch feel more comforting than anything she'd experienced in the 2 years since her parents' death? The nurse who came to check her vitals smiled knowingly. "Judge Kingsley is quite something, isn't he?" "Judge?" Fiona repeated, the word settling uncomfortably in her stomach. "Of course." The expensive suit, the commanding presence, the way everyone in the hospital seemed to defer to him instantly. She should have guessed. "Federal judge," the nurse continued, adjusting the IV drip. "One of the youngest ever appointed. Brilliant legal mind, they say. Also very private. In all my years here, I've never seen him show such concern for a stranger." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they made her acutely aware of the vast distance between them. Him in his world of power and prestige, her drowning in bills she couldn't pay, and a custody battle she couldn't win. Everett stood in the hospital's legal records room, the file spread before him on the desk. He shouldn't be here, had no business accessing this information. Yet the moment he'd learned her name from the admissions paperwork, Fiona Langley, something had compelled him to dig deeper. What he found made his jaw tighten with anger. Custody petition filed by the state, questioning of her ability to provide adequate care for her minor brother. Scheduled court appearance in 2 weeks. The case file outlined her situation with clinical precision. 27 years old, sole guardian of a 10-year-old boy with a complex cardiac condition requiring extensive treatment. Financial instability. No family support system. The recommendation was clear. Investigation into alternative placement for the minor child. They were going to take her brother away. Everett's hands curled into fists on the desk. He'd seen too many cases like this. Good people crushed by a system designed to protect but often destroying in the process. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was part of that system, had built his career on interpreting and enforcing these very laws. But this felt different. She felt different. He thought of her honey-colored eyes, the way exhaustion had carved shadows beneath them, the fierce protective instinct in her voice when she'd mentioned her brother, the way she'd apologized for collapsing, as if her body's surrender to overwhelming circumstances was somehow a personal failing. The memory of her in his arms surfaced unbidden, how perfectly she'd fit against his chest, how his body had responded with a protective surge he hadn't felt in years, not since his mother had needed him, and he'd been too buried in his career to notice until it was too late. He'd promised himself after her death that he would never allow himself to care that deeply again. Caring meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant pain. He'd dated occasionally, maintained a relationship with Victoria Ashford for nearly a year because it was expected, because she moved in the right circles and demanded nothing beyond surface-level companionship. It had been easy, safe, meaningless. One look into Fiona Langley's eyes, and easy had shattered like glass. Everett closed the file, his mind already working through possibilities. The case was weak, circumstantial evidence based primarily on financial instability and the demanding nature of her brother's medical care. A good lawyer could fight it. He could make some calls, connect her with resources, except she didn't look like someone who would accept charity. Pride radiated from her even in unconsciousness. He needed a different approach. When Fiona was finally released from the emergency room 2 hours later, she expected the mysterious judge to be long gone. Instead, she found him leaning against the wall outside her brother's room, looking completely out of place in his immaculate charcoal suit among the colorful pediatric ward decorations. He straightened when he saw her, and Fiona's traitorous heart did a little flip. "You're still here," she said, then immediately felt stupid for stating the obvious. That habit she had of filling silences with unnecessary words kicked in before she could stop it. "Not that you shouldn't be here. Obviously you can be wherever you want. I just meant I didn't expect. I thought you'd have left by now because you must be busy and important and—" "Fiona." Her name in his deep voice stopped her rambling instantly. "Breathe." She did, pulling air into lungs that seemed to have forgotten their function. How did he know her name? Right. Hospital records. He was a judge. Probably had access to everything. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he continued, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "And to check on your brother." Her protective instincts flared immediately. "Jamie. You saw Jamie." "Through the window. I didn't go in, didn't want to disturb him." Everett gestured to the observation window beside the door. "The nurse said he's resting comfortably." Something in Fiona's chest loosened at his consideration. Most people didn't think about things like that, didn't consider that a sick child might not want strange visitors. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. The catching me thing, staying until I woke up, checking on Jamie. You've been incredibly kind, Mr. Judge. I'm sorry, I don't actually know how to address you properly. Everett." The correction came quickly. "Just Everett. Just Everett," she repeated, and a small smile tugged at her lips despite everything. "That feels very informal for someone who wears such an intimidating suit." Was she actually attempting humor with a federal judge? Exhaustion must have completely destroyed her filter, but Everett's mouth quirked slightly at one corner, transforming his austere features into something almost approachable. "The suit is armor, helps maintain courtroom authority. And what about outside the courtroom?" The question hung between them, heavier with meaning than she'd intended. His expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across his features. "Outside the courtroom, I'm still figuring that out," he said finally. Before Fiona could process that admission, a doctor emerged from Jamie's room, and her attention immediately shifted. Dr. Patel had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, but Fiona had learned to read the subtle tells in physicians' expressions. This conversation wasn't going to be good news. "Ms. Langley, I wanted to update you on the treatment plan we discussed." Fiona felt Everett move closer, a solid presence at her side. She should probably ask him to leave for this private medical discussion, but she found herself grateful for his proximity, as if his strength could somehow shore up her own crumbling foundations. Dr. Patel outlined the recommended procedure, the timeline, the costs that made Fiona's vision swim again. She gripped the wall to steady herself, and without a word Everett's hand came to rest at the small of her back. Not pushing, not pulling, just there, anchoring her when everything else felt like quicksand. "I understand," she heard herself say, though she understood nothing except that she was drowning and no one was throwing her a rope. "I'll figure out the financial arrangements." Dr. Patel's sympathetic expression said he'd heard that before and knew how rarely it worked out. He excused himself, leaving Fiona and Everett alone in the corridor. "How much?" Everett asked quietly. "It doesn't matter. I'll find a way." "Fiona." "I said I'll find a way." The words came out sharper than intended, panic leaking through her carefully maintained composure. She pressed her fingers to her temples, fighting back tears she couldn't afford to shed. "I'm sorry, that was rude. You've been nothing but helpful, and I'm being overwhelmed, he finished for her. You're being overwhelmed, and you have every right to be. His hand was still on her back, and she found herself leaning into that touch, despite every self-preservation instinct screaming at her to maintain distance. I don't have anyone else, she whispered, the confession breaking free before she could stop it. It's just me and Jamie. Our parents died 2 years ago, and there's no other family. And if I can't give him this treatment, if I can't keep him safe, her voice broke. Everett turned her toward him, and suddenly his hands were on her shoulders, steady and warm and impossibly comforting. You're not alone, he said with a certainty that made something in her chest crack open. Not anymore. 3 days after the hospital incident, Fiona stood under the bus shelter, watching rain hammer against the plastic roof. The weather matched her mood perfectly, dark, relentless, and cold. Her phone call with the lawyer handling Jamie's custody case still echoed in her ears. The hearing has been moved up to next week. The state is arguing that the medical emergency demonstrates your inability to provide stable care. I'll be frank, Ms. Langley, without a significant change in your circumstances, the outcome doesn't look favorable. She'd thanked him mechanically and hung up before he could hear her voice crack. The bus was late. Of course it was. Fiona wrapped her thin jacket tighter, ignoring how the rain had already soaked through her canvas sneakers. She should have bought an umbrella years ago, but umbrellas cost money, and money went to keeping the flower shop afloat, and Jamie fed. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, water spraying from expensive tires. The passenger window rolled down, and Fiona's heart performed that annoying flip it had been doing every time she thought about a certain judge over the past 72 hours. Get in, Everett said, his voice brooking no argument. I'm fine waiting for the bus. Fiona, you're soaked. Get in the car. I don't need... Please. The single word, softened by something that sounded almost like desperation, made her pause. Just get in. She did, immediately feeling self-conscious about dripping water all over his pristine leather seats. The interior smelled like him, that woodsy cologne that had haunted her dreams since the hospital. Everett reached into the back seat and produced a towel, handing it to her without comment. How did you know where to find me? Fiona asked, dabbing at her soaked hair. I didn't. I was on my way to see you at the flower shop. He pulled back into traffic with the easy confidence of someone who controlled everything around him. We need to talk. Those 4 words never preceded anything good. Fiona's stomach knotted. If this is about repaying you for the hospital, it's about your custody hearing. Her hands stilled on the towel. How do you know about that? Everett's jaw tightened, and he adjusted his collar, that nervous tell she'd already catalogued in her mental file of things she noticed about him. I'm a federal judge, Fiona. I have access to court records. You investigated me. It should have made her angry. Instead, she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with wet clothes. Yes. No apology in his tone. And what I found makes me want to put my fist through a wall. The raw emotion in his voice startled her. This wasn't the controlled judge from the hospital. This was a man barely containing fury on her behalf. The system is broken, he continued, hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled force. They're punishing you for circumstances beyond your control. You're doing everything right, working yourself to exhaustion, sacrificing everything for your brother, and they're going to take him away because you can't afford a treatment that no reasonable person could afford. I know. The words came out small, defeated. My lawyer said the same thing, just with more legal jargon and less obvious sympathy. Everett pulled the car into an empty parking lot overlooking the river. Rain obscured the view, turning the world into watercolor grays and blues. He shifted in his seat to face her, and Fiona was struck again by how his presence seemed to fill every available space. I have a proposition, he said carefully, and before you say no, I need you to hear me out completely. Warning bells rang in Fiona's mind. What kind of proposition? Marry me. The words hung in the air between them, absurd and impossible. Fiona laughed, except it came out more like a choked sound. I'm sorry. What? A legal marriage. A contract. Everett's dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You become my wife on paper. In return, you get financial stability, access to the best medical care for Jamie, and most importantly, unquestionable proof that you can provide a stable home environment. The custody case becomes irrelevant. You're insane. But even as she said it, Fiona's mind was racing through the implications. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. I know enough. His voice dropped lower, rougher. I know you're drowning and everyone's watching you sink. I know you're 1 week away from losing the person you love most in this world. And I know I can help. What do you get out of this? Suspicion crept into her tone. Nobody offers something this extreme without wanting something in return. Everett looked away, jaw working. When he spoke again, his words came slowly, as if each one cost him something. I have an ex-girlfriend, Victoria Ashford. We dated for a year, broke up 6 months ago. She's having difficulty accepting that decision. She wants you back. She wants the image of us back. I come from a prominent legal family. Victoria is a state senator's daughter. Our relationship was convenient, expected. She's been making things difficult, showing up at my office, calling my father, hinting to colleagues that we're reconciling. He met Fiona's gaze again. Their wife would solve that problem definitively. It was so calculated, so transactional. Yet underneath the clinical explanation, Fiona sensed something else, a weariness that matched her own, a desire to escape circumstances neither of them had chosen. This is crazy, she whispered. Yes, we barely know each other. We'll learn. What if... She bit her lip, stopping the flood of questions before they could escape. What if I start to care? What if this pretend marriage feels too real? What if you break my heart without even trying? Fiona! Everett reached out, his hand covering hers on the seat between them. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. I'm not asking for forever. I'm offering you a solution. 6 months, a year. Whatever it takes to get Jamie's treatment and solidify your custody. Then we can file for divorce quietly. Part as friends. Friends. As if they could ever be something so simple. I need to think about it, Fiona managed, though her body was hyper-aware of his hand on hers, the warmth seeping through her rain-chilled skin. Of course. He didn't pull away. Take whatever time you need. They sat in the car, rain drumming on the roof, hands touching in a way that felt like a promise neither of them was ready to make. Fiona's phone rang at 7 that evening. Her lawyer, voice tight with urgency. Ms. Langley, I'm sorry to call so late, but there's been a development. The hearing has been moved up again. To this Friday, 3 days from now, the state's attorney is pushing hard, and the judge approved the expedited timeline. 3 days. 72 hours to save her brother from being taken away. Fiona's hands trembled as she ended the call. She stared at her phone, at the business card tucked into its case, with Everett's number written in precise handwriting. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. She dialed before she could talk herself out of it. He answered on the first ring. Everett. Her voice shook. I need to talk to you about your proposal. I'll be there in 15 minutes. No hesitation, no questions, just immediate action. How do you know where I live? A pause. I'm a judge, remember? Despite everything, Fiona felt her lips curve into the smallest smile. That's either really helpful or really creepy. Let's go with helpful. There was warmth in his voice now, a tenderness that made her chest ache. 15 minutes, Fiona, hold on. She held on, and when he arrived 13 minutes later, umbrella in hand to walk her to his car despite the short distance, Fiona made a decision that would change everything. I accept, she said, rain mixing with tears on her cheeks. I'll marry you. Everett's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away the moisture beneath her eye with devastating gentleness. Then I promise you, no matter what happens, I will keep you and Jamie safe. It was a vow spoken before any ceremony, binding in ways no legal document could ever be. Everett's house wasn't what Fiona expected. She'd imagined something cold and modern, all steel and glass like the man himself. Instead, the colonial-style home in a quiet suburban neighborhood had warmth, hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, a kitchen with morning light streaming through bay windows. The master bedroom is upstairs, Everett said, carrying her single suitcase with an ease that made her acutely aware of his physical strength. You and Jamie will take it. I'll use the guest room down the hall. Fiona followed him up the stairs, trying not to stare at the way his shoulders filled out his shirt. They'd gotten married at the courthouse that morning, a ceremony that took less than 10 minutes, witnessed by 2 court clerks who looked thoroughly bored. She wore a simple cream-colored dress she'd owned for years. He wore another one of his armor suits. The kiss required to seal their vows had been brief, chaste, his lips barely brushing hers. Yet Fiona's entire body had lit up like 4th of July fireworks, and she'd seen something flicker in his dark eyes before he'd stepped back with careful control. Now, standing in the doorway of what was technically their shared bedroom, the reality of the situation crashed over her. "I can't take your room," she protested. "We can figure out something else." "Fiona." He set the suitcase down with deliberate care. "Jamie needs stability and comfort. This room has the ensuite bathroom, more space, better light. It makes sense. But where will you—" "The guest room is perfectly adequate." His tone left no room for argument. "This discussion is over." There it was, that autocratic tendency to make decisions without consulting her. Fiona felt her spine stiffen. "You know, just because we're married doesn't mean you get to dictate everything." Everett turned to face her fully, and something dangerous flashed in his expression. "I'm not dictating. I'm being practical." Practical would be discussing options together. "What you're doing is steamrolling." "Steamrolling," he repeated, and she couldn't tell if he was amused or annoyed. "That's a new one. Get used to it. I have a whole vocabulary for when you're being impossible." The words came out before she could filter them, that nervous habit of talking too much when uncomfortable, making her sound braver than she felt. The corner of Everett's mouth twitched. "I look forward to expanding my dictionary." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Fiona didn't want to name. She cleared her throat and looked away first, hating how easily he affected her. "I should unpack," she said, needing distance before she did something stupid like close the space between them. "Dinner's at 7. I'll cook." That made her look back at him in surprise. "You cook?" "I'm a man of many hidden talents, Mrs. Kingsley." The way he said her new name, with a slight rasp that did dangerous things to her pulse, should be illegal. He left before she could respond, and Fiona sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing her palms to her flushed cheeks. This was going to be harder than she thought. Everett gripped the kitchen counter, his knuckles white with tension. What the hell was he doing? The plan had been simple. Marry her, provide the stability she needed, maintain professional distance. Easy, controlled. Except nothing about Fiona Langley was easy to control. The way she'd looked at him with those honey eyes full of defiance when she'd called him impossible. The way her cheeks had flushed when he'd said her married name. The way her lips had felt under his for that one devastating second at the courthouse, soft and warm and completely off-limits. He'd spent years perfecting emotional detachment, had convinced himself he was better off alone, that caring too much led to inevitable failure and loss. His mother's death had proven that he'd been so consumed with his career that he'd missed the signs of her illness until it was too late. Never again, he'd promised himself. Yet here he was, married to a woman who made him want to break every vow of self-protection he'd ever made. Everett forced himself to focus on dinner preparation, channeling his chaotic thoughts into precise knife work. Cooking had always been meditative for him, one of the few activities where he could shut off his analytical mind and just exist in the moment. The sound of small footsteps on the stairs made him look up. Jamie appeared in the kitchen doorway, wide-eyed and cautious. The boy was smaller than Everett expected for 10 years old, his features delicate like his sister's. But there was strength in his gaze, the kind that came from facing adult challenges too young. "Hi," Jamie said softly. "Fiona said I should come introduce myself properly." Everett set down his knife and crouched to the boy's level, instinct telling him not to tower over this child who'd already been through too much. "Hi, Jamie. I'm Everett." "I know. You're my sister's husband now." Jamie studied him with unnerving intensity. "Are you going to be nice to her?" The question, asked with such serious concern, made something crack in Everett's chest. "Yes," he promised, meaning it more than any vow he'd spoken at the courthouse. "Always." "Good, because Fiona cries sometimes at night when she thinks I'm sleeping, ever since Mom and Dad died. I don't want her to be sad anymore." Everett swallowed hard against the unexpected emotion clogging his throat. "I don't want her to be sad either." Jamie nodded, apparently satisfied. Then he noticed the cutting board. "What are you making?" "Chicken marsala. Do you like Italian food?" "I don't know. We mostly eat mac and cheese and PB&J. No judgment in the statement, just fact." "Then we'll have to expand your culinary horizons." Everett made a decision in that moment. one that went against every self-protective instinct he had. "Want to help?" Jamie's face lit up with a smile that transformed his solemn features. "Really? Really? Wash your hands first." As the boy scrambled to the sink, Fiona appeared in the doorway. She'd changed into jeans and a soft sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and Everett saw her take in the scene, her brother chattering excitedly as Everett patiently explained how to season chicken. Something shifted in her expression, her honey eyes growing suspiciously bright. She pressed her fingers to her lips, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as her way of containing overwhelming emotion. "Need any help?" she asked, voice slightly husky. "Shao can set the table," Everett said. Then, because he couldn't help himself, added, "And stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I just did something extraordinary. I'm making dinner, not performing surgery. You're cooking with my brother." Fiona moved into the kitchen, brushing past him to reach the cabinet where he'd pointed out the plates. The brief contact of her body against his sent electricity sparking through every nerve. "That's pretty extraordinary from where I'm standing." She reached up for the plates on the top shelf, standing on her tiptoes. Everett watched her struggle for approximately 3 seconds before his body moved on its own accord. He stepped behind her, his chest nearly touching her back, and easily retrieved the dishes. Fiona froze. He could feel her breath catch, sense the way her pulse jumped in the delicate column of her throat, visible just inches from his face. The scent of her shampoo, something floral and light, wrapped around him. "You know," he said quietly, his voice rougher than intended, "you could just ask for help instead of climbing on furniture. Where's the fun in that?" But her voice wavered, betraying how affected she was by his proximity. Everett knew he should step back, create distance. Remember, this was supposed to be a business arrangement. Instead, he let himself linger for 1 heartbeat longer, close enough to feel her warmth, before forcing himself to move away. When he glanced back, Fiona was staring at the plates in her hands like she'd forgotten what they were for, her cheeks beautifully flushed. "Tempest," he murmured, testing the nickname that had been forming in his mind. She looked up sharply. "What?" "You heard me." He returned to the stove, fighting a smile. "You're like a storm, unpredictable, impossible to control, and leaving chaos in your wake." "I am not chaotic. You've been here 2 hours and already reorganized my entire dish cabinet." "It was disorganized. It was alphabetized." "By color doesn't count as organization, Everett." Jamie giggled, the sound bright and pure. Both adults stopped their bickering to look at the boy, who was grinning wider than Fiona had seen in months. Maybe, Everett thought, chaos wasn't such a bad thing after all. The first week of living together established an unspoken rhythm. Everett left for the courthouse at 7 each morning, always pausing to check if Fiona needed anything before he went. She'd started working from home, managing her flower shop remotely while Jamie recovered from his latest hospital visit, and every evening, without fail, Everett returned by 6:30 with that intense focus entirely shifted to them. Fiona tried not to notice how her heart rate picked up when she heard his car in the driveway, tried not to watch how he loosened his tie the moment he walked through the door, that small gesture somehow more intimate than it had any right to be, tried not to feel the weight of his gaze on her throughout dinner, heavy with things neither of them would say. She was failing spectacularly at all of it. "You're staring again," her best friend Mara said over the phone, somehow knowing despite being miles away at the flower shop. "I am not." Fiona wedged the phone between her shoulder and ear while folding laundry in the living room. "I'm simply observing. Observing your fake husband's incredibly attractive features? Sure, we'll call it that." Mara's laugh was infectious. "Honey, when are you going to admit this arrangement is getting complicated?" "It's not complicated. It's a contract. A contract that has you blushing every time he enters a room." "I don't blush." Fiona caught sight of her reflection in the hallway mirror, cheeks distinctly pink. "Okay, fine. Maybe there's some attraction, but that's normal. He's objectively attractive, and thoughtful, and protective. And didn't you say he reads to Jamie every night?" That was the part Fiona couldn't quite process. For 3 nights in a row, Everett had knocked on Jamie's bedroom door at 8 o'clock, a book in hand. Her brother had looked at her with such hopeful eyes that she couldn't possibly object. Now it was routine. Everett disappearing into Jamie's room for an hour, emerging with his hair slightly mussed from where Jamie played with it during the stories. The domesticity of it terrified her. "He's being kind," Fiona said, more to convince herself than Mara. "It doesn't mean anything." "Right. Keep telling yourself that." After hanging up, Fiona wandered toward Jamie's room, drawn by the sound of Everett's deep voice reading. She stopped in the doorway, her breath catching at the scene before her. Everett sat on the edge of Jamie's bed, book open on his lap, reading with surprising animation. He did different voices for each character, making Jamie giggle. Her brother was supposed to be lying down, resting as the doctor ordered. Instead, he was leaning against Everett's side, small fingers gripping the judge's shirt sleeve. And Everett, the man who prided himself on control and professional distance, had his arm wrapped around Jamie's thin shoulders, holding him close with a tenderness that made Fiona's throat tighten. And then the knight said, Everett read in an exaggerated baritone, "No dragon is too fearsome when you're protecting someone you love." "Like how you protect Fiona," Jamie said matter-of-factly. Everett's reading faltered. Fiona saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed. "Yes," he said quietly. "Like that. And me too. Do you protect me too? Always." No hesitation. "That's what family does. Family." The word hung in the air, impossibly heavy. Jamie beamed, snuggling closer, completely unaware he'd just detonated something in both adults' chests. Fiona must have made a sound, a tiny intake of breath, because Everett's gaze snapped to the doorway. Their eyes met, held. She saw everything he wasn't saying written across his face. This wasn't supposed to happen. "I didn't mean to care this much. What are we doing?" She fled before he could see that her expression probably mirrored his exactly. 2 nights later, Fiona worked late in the home office Everett had insisted on setting up for her, managing orders and updating the shop's website. When she finally emerged around 11, the house was dark, except for the lamp in the living room. She found them on the couch. Jamie was sprawled across Everett's chest, fast asleep. An illustrated book of constellations lay open on the floor where it had fallen. Everett's head was tilted back against the cushions, one hand resting protectively on Jamie's back, the other hanging loose at his side. His features, usually so severe, were soft in sleep, vulnerable, beautiful. Fiona pressed her fingers to her mouth, trying to contain the sob that wanted to escape. This man, this stranger who'd become her husband to save her brother, had somehow become the father figure Jamie desperately needed. And she was falling, hard and fast, and completely against every rule they'd set. Moving quietly, she retrieved a blanket from the hallway closet. She meant to drape it over them and leave, maintain some semblance of distance. But as she leaned over to tuck the blanket around Jamie, Everett's eyes opened. He didn't move, didn't disturb Jamie, just looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath. In the dim lamplight, his dark eyes were fathomless, full of questions she wasn't ready to answer. "How long have you been out here?" she whispered. "He wanted to see the stars," Everett murmured, voice rough with sleep. "I was teaching him the constellations. We must have dozed off." Fiona's hand was still on the blanket, which meant it was also resting on Everett's shoulder. She should move it, should definitely move it. Instead, her fingers curled slightly into the soft cotton of his t-shirt. "You don't have to do this," she said, though what this encompassed she couldn't quite define. The bedtime stories, the constellation lessons. The contract didn't include, "I want to." The words were simple but carried weight. He's a good kid, smart, funny. He deserves someone who shows up, unlike everyone else in his life who'd left. The unspoken words hung between them. "Thank you," Fiona whispered. And suddenly they were too close, his face just inches from hers as she leaned over the couch. She could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, count his eyelashes, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Fiona. Her name sounded like a warning, or maybe a plea. "I should go." But she didn't move. "You should." He didn't look away. Jamie shifted in his sleep, breaking the spell. Everett carefully adjusted his hold on the boy, and Fiona straightened, putting necessary distance between them. "I can carry him upstairs," Everett offered. "You don't have to—" "I know." He was already standing, cradling Jamie with practiced ease. "I want to." Fiona followed them upstairs, watching as Everett gently settled her brother into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. He smoothed Jamie's hair back from his forehead. Such a paternal gesture, it made her eyes burn. In the hallway, with Jamie's door closed between them and the sleeping child, Everett finally looked at her again. Really looked, in that way that made her feel transparent. "This is getting complicated," he said quietly. "I know. We should probably talk about that. We should. But not tonight. Not when her defenses were down, and he looked at her like she was something precious. Good night, Everett." He reached out, almost touched her cheek, then seemed to think better of it. His hand fell back to his side. "Good night, Tempest." Fiona lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, acutely aware that Everett was doing the same just down the hall. The space between their rooms felt simultaneously too far and not nearly far enough. She'd married him to save Jamie, but who was going to save her from falling in love with her own husband? October painted the trees in shades of amber and crimson. Fiona stood in the garden, pruning the roses Everett had insisted she plant, despite her protests that she didn't need a garden. Somehow they'd become hers anyway, like so many things in this house that had started as his and transformed into theirs. 3 weeks of marriage, 21 days of carefully maintained boundaries and spectacular failures at keeping them. She heard the back door open and didn't need to turn to know it was him. Her body had developed a sixth sense for Everett's presence, hyper-aware of when he entered a room, when his gaze landed on her, when he was close enough to touch. "You're home early," she said, snipping a spent bloom. "Had a light docket today." His footsteps approached on the stone path. "And I wanted to check on you." "I'm fine. Just enjoying the weather before it gets too cold." Everett came to stand beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed her arm. He'd shed his suit jacket somewhere inside, rolled up his shirt sleeves to reveal forearms that Fiona absolutely did not spend an unreasonable amount of time admiring. "You're frowning," he observed. "Am I? You get this little crease right here." His finger touched the space between her brows so gently she forgot to breathe. "When you're worried about something." Fiona forced herself to focus on the roses, and not the lingering warmth where he'd touched her. "Jamie has a follow-up appointment tomorrow. I'm always anxious before those." It wasn't the whole truth. The real worry was how seamlessly this life had become her reality. How natural it felt to hear Everett's key in the lock each evening. How right it seemed when the three of them sat together at dinner, talking about their days like any normal family. How much it would hurt when this arrangement inevitably ended. "He's going to be fine," Everett said, with the confidence of someone who'd made it his personal mission to ensure that statement was true. Dr. Patel said the preliminary test results were encouraging. "I know. She set down the pruning shears, turning to face him. "I'm not used to things going right. It makes me nervous." Understanding flickered in his dark eyes. "Waiting for the other shoe to drop." Something like that. They stood in the garden as autumn wind scattered leaves around them. Everett's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he tucked a wayward strand of hair behind her ear. That gesture that had become his, that made her pulse spike every single time. "Maybe," he said quietly, "this is what your life is supposed to look like. Good things, stability, someone to share the worry with. Is that what you are?" Someone to share worry with? The question came out more vulnerable than intended. Everett's jaw tightened. That tell she'd learned meant he was fighting some internal battle. "I'm trying to figure that out myself." Before either could examine that admission further, Jamie burst through the back door. "Everett, you're home. Can we practice chess? You promised to teach me the night's opening." The moment shattered. Everett stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself. But his eyes lingered on Fiona for one more heartbeat before he turned to Jamie with a smile that transformed his severe features. "Go set up the board. I'll be right there." As Jamie raced back inside, Everett glanced at Fiona one more time. "We're not done with this conversation." A promise or maybe a threat. Either way, it made her heart race. That evening, while Everett taught Jamie chess in the living room, Fiona retreated to the Home Office to handle some paperwork. Her parents' estate had been a mess. Creditors, liens, legal complications she still didn't fully understand. Most of it had been resolved over the 2 years since their deaths, but occasionally something surfaced requiring attention. Tonight's discovery, however, made her blood run cold. The document was buried in a file she'd never opened, dated 7 years prior. A lawsuit her parents had been involved in? A construction company called Kingsley Development had built a strip mall on land her father owned. Faulty construction had led to structural failure. Her parents had sued. The case had been settled out of court, but the legal fees and subsequent financial complications had bankrupted them. Kingsley Development. Fiona's hands trembled as she pulled up the corporate records on her laptop. Listed as legal counsel for Kingsley Development, Harrison Kingsley, Esquire Everett's father. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The financial ruin that had plagued her parents' final years, the stress that had undoubtedly contributed to the car accident that took them, the poverty that had shaped her and Jamie's lives ever since, all traced back to the Kingsley family. Did Everett know? He'd said he investigated her background before proposing marriage. Surely he'd seen the connection. Which meant, what? That he'd deliberately hidden it? Married her anyway without telling her? Or worse, was this some kind of guilt-driven charity? Poor Fiona Langley, destroyed by his father's legal maneuvering, in need of rescue by the noble son. Nausea rolled through her stomach. Every kind gesture, every moment of seeming tenderness, had it all been pity, an attempt to assuage family guilt? She thought of Jamie downstairs, laughing with a man he'd grown to trust, to love. God, how could she have been so stupid? Fiona stood on shaking legs, the documents clutched in her white-knuckled grip. She should think this through rationally. Should wait until she wasn't drowning in betrayal and rage. Should... Her body moved on autopilot, carrying her down the stairs to where Everett and Jamie were bent over the chessboard. They looked up as she entered, and whatever expression was on her face made Everett go very still. "Jamie, sweetie, it's bedtime," she said. Proud, her voice didn't shake. But Everett was about to show me. "Now, please." Harder than she intended. Jamie's face fell, but he obediently headed for the stairs, shooting confused looks between the adults. The moment his bedroom door closed, Everett stood. "What's wrong? How long were you planning to hide it?" Fiona threw the documents on the chess table. They scattered across the board, knocking over carefully positioned pieces. "Or did you think I'd never find out?" Everett's gaze dropped to the papers. She watched his face shift from confusion to comprehension to something that looked devastatingly like guilt. "Fiona, your father." Her voice broke on the word. "Your father destroyed my family. Those legal fees, that settlement, it bankrupted my parents, and you knew, and you didn't tell me." "I didn't know, not when I proposed." He reached for her, but she jerked back. The hurt that flashed across his features only fueled her anger. "I found out 2 days after our wedding when I was reviewing your family's full legal history. I was trying to find the right time to tell you." 2 days? Fiona's laugh was bitter. "We've been married for 3 weeks, Everett." "When exactly was the right time? Before or after you turned my brother into your adoring shadow?" "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word exploded out of her. "You want to talk about fair? Your family took everything from mine. And now you, what? Married me out of guilt? Decided to play hero to ease your conscience? You know that's not..." He ran his hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "God, Fiona, if you would just listen." "I did listen. I listened when you promised to keep us safe. I listened to every pretty word about how this was just a practical arrangement." Tears threatened, and she hated them, hated her weakness. "I let myself believe." She cut herself off before she could finish that sentence, before she could admit she'd let herself believe this could be real. "What?" Everett's voice dropped, intense and demanding. "What did you let yourself believe?" "Nothing. It doesn't matter." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm house. "I need some time to think." "Fiona, please." The rawness in his voice almost undid her. "Don't shut me out. We can work through this." "Can we?" She met his eyes, saw the desperation there, and felt her resolve crack. "Your father ruined my life. How do we work through that?" "He's not me." Everett took a careful step closer. "Whatever my father did, however terrible, it's not me, Fiona. I would never..." "I know." And God help her, she did know. Could see the truth of it in every sleepless night he'd spent researching Jamie's condition, every gentle touch, every moment of tenderness he thought she didn't notice. "But it doesn't change what he did, what your family did to mine." "Then let me make it right." "You can't." The words came out broken. Some things can't be fixed, Everett. She turned and walked up the stairs, each step feeling like breaking. Behind her she heard nothing. No footsteps following, no protests, no demands. Just silence. And somehow that was worse than anything else. Fiona moved through the bedroom like an automaton, pulling clothes from drawers and stuffing them into her suitcase. It was past midnight. Jamie slept soundly down the hall, blissfully unaware his world was about to shatter again. Her hands trembled as she folded a sweater. This was the right decision. The only decision. She couldn't stay here. Couldn't keep pretending this arrangement wasn't destroying her from the inside out. Every day with Everett made it harder to remember this was temporary, made her want things she had no right to want. And now, knowing his father had been the architect of her family's ruin, it felt like the universe's cruel joke. Of course, the man she was falling for would be connected to her greatest tragedy. She heard the bedroom door open, but didn't turn around. "What are you doing?" Everett's voice was rough, strained. "What does it look like?" She grabbed another shirt from the closet, movements jerky with suppressed emotion. "I'm leaving." "You can't." 2 words, flat and absolute. That made her turn. He stood in the doorway, still wearing the clothes from dinner, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were dark with something that looked like barely controlled panic. "Watch me." She went back to packing, anything to avoid looking at him. "Fiona, please." He crossed the room in 3 strides. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But leaving in the middle of the night isn't what? Smart? Safe?" She spun to face him, clutching a dress against her chest like armor. "You want to talk about what's smart? Marrying a stranger wasn't smart. Letting Jamie get attached wasn't smart. Believing for 1 second that this could be anything other than a business arrangement definitely wasn't smart. Is that what you think this is?" His voice dropped dangerously low. "A business arrangement? That's what you said it was." "I lied." The admission hung between them, raw and devastating. Or maybe I was lying to myself. I don't know anymore. Fiona's heart stuttered. She couldn't do this. Couldn't have this conversation when her defenses were in tatters, and he looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him standing. "It doesn't matter," she managed. "Your father destroyed my family, Everett. That's not something we can just move past." "I'm not my father." He took another step closer. "I'm not him, Fiona. I would never—" "I know." The words broke on a sob she couldn't contain. "Don't you think I know that? I see who you are, how you are with Jamie. The way you—" She pressed her hands to her face, unable to finish. "The way I what?" His hands wrapped around her wrists, gently pulling them away from her face. "Tell me. The way you look at me like I matter." Tears spilled over, hot and humiliating. "Like we matter. And I can't do this anymore, pretending I don't feel—" She cut herself off, but the damage was done. Everett's eyes widened, his grip on her wrists tightening. "Feel what?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Say it, Fiona." "No." She tried to pull away, but he held firm. "Let me go. Not until you say it." "Everett." "I'll say it first, then." His forehead dropped to hers, breath warm against her lips. "I'm falling for you. Have been since the moment I caught you in that hospital corridor. Maybe before in some cosmic way I don't understand. And it terrifies me because I swore I'd never let myself care this much about anyone again." Fiona's breath hitched. "Don't. Don't what?" "Don't tell you the truth. Don't admit that I wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is you. That I come home early because being away from you feels wrong. That watching you with Jamie makes me want things I have no right to want." "Stop." But she didn't pull away. Couldn't, even though every survival instinct screamed at her to run. "You want to leave because of something my father did years before we met?" Everett's hands moved from her wrists to cup her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "Fine. Go. Walk out that door. But know this. I will follow you. I will show up at your apartment, at your flower shop, anywhere you run. Not because of guilt or obligation or some misguided attempt at redemption." "Then why?" The question came out broken. "Because you're mine." His voice turned fierce, possessive in a way that sent heat spiraling through her. "And I'm yours. And I don't care if it's inconvenient or complicated or makes absolutely no sense. I don't care if the timing is terrible or if my father's actions created an impossible situation. None of it matters." "How can you say that?" Because I've spent the last 3 weeks trying not to fall in love with my own wife, and I'm done fighting it. His thumb traced her bottom lip, and Fiona felt herself sway toward him. Stay, please. Give me a chance to make this right. I don't know if you can. Then let me try. His forehead pressed harder against hers, voices barely a whisper in the space between them. I'll spend every day for the rest of my life trying if that's what it takes. Fiona closed her eyes, feeling the war raging inside her. Pride demanded she leave. Self-preservation insisted distance was survival. But her heart, traitorous, foolish thing, wanted to stay more than it wanted to breathe. If I stay, she whispered, I need time, space to process this. Anything. His relief was palpable. Whatever you need. And you have to tell me everything. No more secrets about your father, about my family's case, about anything. I will. I promise. She opened her eyes to find him watching her with such raw vulnerability, it made her chest ache. This powerful man, this judge who commanded courtrooms, was on the verge of breaking because she'd threatened to leave. Okay, she breathed, I'll stay. The tension drained from his shoulders. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his heart racing against her chest. Fiona let herself sink into the embrace, into the warmth and safety of him, even as a voice in her head whispered this was dangerous. She was already too far gone to care. Fiona stayed, but staying and being present turned out to be very different things. She moved through the house like a ghost of herself, polite, distant, careful never to let her guard down. She maintained her routine with Jamie, managed her flower shop remotely, even sat at dinner with Everett each evening. But the walls she'd erected were impenetrable. Everett felt every inch of distance like a knife wound. He'd watch her retreat to the bedroom each night, that space between them growing wider despite sleeping under the same roof. The easy banter they'd developed disappeared. She no longer called him impossible when he made unilateral decisions, didn't blush when he invaded her space to reach things on high shelves, avoided his eyes during meals. It was killing him slowly. You're brooding, his colleague Marcus observed during lunch break at the courthouse. More than usual, which is saying something. Everett pushed his food around his plate. Just a complex case. The complex case have honey-colored eyes and a stubborn streak a mile wide? He shot Marcus a warning look. I don't know what you're talking about. Right, because you totally didn't rush through oral arguments this morning to get home early. Again. Marcus leaned back, studying him. I've known you for 10 years, Ev. Never seen you like this. What happened? What happened? He'd fallen in love with his wife. His temporary, contractual wife, who now looked at him like he was a stranger. Who flinched, actually flinched, when he accidentally brushed her hand reaching for the salt. She's pulling away, Everett admitted quietly. And I don't know how to reach her. Did you try talking to her? Every time I try, she shuts down, changes the subject, finds reasons to leave the room. He rubbed his face tiredly. I'm losing her and I don't even really have her to begin with. Marcus was silent for a moment. Give her time. Whatever happened, she needs to process. Pushing won't help. Time. The one thing Everett had never been good at giving. Victoria Ashford appeared on Thursday like a designer-clad storm cloud. Fiona was in the garden, her refuge these days, when a sleek Mercedes pulled into the driveway. The woman who emerged wore a burgundy suit that probably cost more than Fiona's monthly rent. Blonde hair in a perfect chignon, makeup flawless, movements calculated for maximum impact. You must be the new Mrs. Kingsley, Victoria said, her smile sharp enough to cut. How quaint. Fiona straightened from the rosebush she'd been tending, acutely aware of her dirt-stained jeans and messy braid. Can I help you? Victoria Ashford. I'm sure Everett mentioned me. She extended a manicured hand that Fiona didn't take, though perhaps not. He always was selective with information. The barb hit its target. Fiona crossed her arms, defensive. If you're looking for Everett, he's at work. Actually, I came to see you. Victoria's eyes swept over Fiona with obvious disdain. We should talk. Woman to woman. Everything in Fiona screamed to refuse, to send this perfectly polished reminder of Everett's former life away. But curiosity won out. About what? About the little arrangement you have with my fiancé. Ex-boyfriend, Fiona corrected. Proud, her voice stayed steady. And he's my husband, not yours. Is he, though? Victoria's smile turned predatory. Or is this just an elaborate performance, a marriage of convenience to solve his Victoria problem and your financial situation? Fiona's blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. I have friends everywhere. Friends who work in family court, who handle custody cases, who know exactly why a federal judge would marry a struggling florist he barely knew. Victoria pulled a folder from her designer bag. It's all here. The timeline. The custody hearing scheduled 3 days after your courthouse wedding. Jamie's medical expenses. Very compelling narrative. What do you want? Fiona hated how her voice shook. I want what's mine. Everett belongs with someone of his caliber, not a charity case playing dress-up. Victoria's expression hardened. I'm prepared to take this information public. Do you know what happens to a federal judge accused of marriage fraud? His career, his reputation, destroyed. And your custody case. It gets reopened with evidence of fraudulent circumstances. You lose everything. The garden spun around Fiona. You're blackmailing us. I'm offering a solution. Sign divorce papers. Disappear from Everett's life. I bury this information and ensure your brother's custody remains intact. Victoria's voice turned almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Think about it. If you really care about him, you'll walk away before you destroy him. Get out! Fiona's voice barely worked. Get off our property. You have 48 hours. Victoria dropped a business card on the garden bench. Make the right choice, Mrs. Kingsley. For everyone's sake. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume and veiled threats. Fiona stood frozen among the roses, Victoria's words echoing in her mind. The folder lay on the bench like a bomb. She didn't need to open it to know the woman wasn't bluffing. If she stayed, Everett's career ended. His reputation shattered, everything he'd built destroyed. If she left, she saved him, protected Jamie, lost everything that had started to feel like home. Inside the house, her phone buzzed with a text from Everett. Coming home early. Want to talk about us? Fiona stared at the message until her vision blurred. There was no us to talk about. There never had been. Just a contract that was about to implode and take everyone she loved down with it. She typed back, okay. But she was already mentally packing her bags. Harrison Kingsley arrived unannounced the next morning. Fiona opened the door to find a man who looked like an older, colder version of Everett. Same strong jaw, same commanding presence, but eyes that held calculation instead of warmth. Ms. Langley. He didn't offer his hand. May I come in? Every instinct screamed to slam the door. But Jamie was at a playdate, Everett at the courthouse, and something about Harrison's expression suggested refusing would only delay the inevitable. 5 minutes, she said, not moving from the doorway. That's all I need. He pulled out a leather portfolio, flipping it open with practiced precision. I have documents proving your marriage to my son is fraudulent. Filed 3 days after your custody hearing was scheduled. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Fiona's stomach dropped. Victoria sent you. Victoria confirmed what I already suspected. My son doesn't make impulsive decisions, except apparently when it comes to you. Harrison's gaze turned sharp. I've also discovered something interesting about Jamie's medical situation. There's an experimental treatment program at Johns Hopkins. Full scholarship for qualified candidates. I have connections on the selection board. What do you want? Fiona already knew, could see the trap closing around her. Signed divorce papers. Leave my son's life. Never contact him again. Harrison set a document on the hall table. In exchange, Jamie gets into the Hopkins program. Full treatment, no cost. And I ensure these fraud allegations never surface. Your custody remains secure. You're blackmailing me to abandon my husband. I'm offering you a choice. Stay and watch Everett's career implode when this becomes public. Federal judges don't survive marriage fraud scandals. His reputation, his position, everything he's worked for destroyed. Harrison's voice turned almost gentle, which made it worse. Or leave now, save him from that fate, and give your brother the medical care he desperately needs. Fiona's hands clenched at her sides. Does Everett know you're here? My son has always been brilliant, but naive about people. He sees you as some kind of victim in need of rescue. He doesn't understand that you're the liability that will cost him everything. Harrison straightened his already perfect tie. I'm giving you 48 hours. Make the right decision, Ms. Langley. He left, the document lying on the table like a death sentence. Fiona stared at it, Victoria's folder from yesterday still in her bag upstairs. 2 different sources of blackmail. Same impossible choice. Leave and save everyone. Stay and destroy the man she loved, because she did love him, had fallen completely irrevocably in love with Everett Kingsley, somewhere between his patient chess lessons with Jamie and the way he tucked her hair behind her ear. Which meant the choice wasn't really a choice at all. Everett knew something was catastrophically wrong the moment he walked through the door that evening. The house felt too quiet, too still. Fiona sat at the kitchen table, a document in front of her, eyes red from crying. What happened? He crossed to her in 3 strides, cataloguing every detail. The tension in her shoulders, the way she wouldn't meet his gaze, the folder marked with his father's law firm letterhead. Your father was here. Her voice came out flat, dead. And Victoria before him. Ice flooded Everett's veins. What did they do? She slid the documents across the table. He read quickly, rage building with every word. The fraud allegations, the threats to expose them, the offer of Jamie's treatment in exchange for Fiona disappearing. Son of a bitch. Everett's hands crumpled the papers. When? Your father this morning. Victoria yesterday. Fiona finally looked at him, and the defeat in her eyes destroyed him. They both have evidence, both made the same offer, my absence for Jamie's treatment and your reputation intact. You're not going anywhere. The words came out harsh, absolute. Everett. No. He crouched in front of her chair, gripping her hands. I don't care what they threatened. I don't care about my career or my reputation or my father's approval. You are not leaving. If I stay, you lose everything. I already lost everything once. His voice cracked. When my mother died, and I realized I'd been too busy building a career to notice she was sick, I swore I'd never let anything matter that much again. And then you fell into my arms in that hospital corridor, and all those walls I'd built just shattered. Tears spilled down Fiona's cheeks. I can't be the reason you lose everything a second time. You're not the reason. They are. My father, Victoria, this whole toxic situation. Everett pressed his forehead to their joined hands. But here's the thing, Tempest. None of it matters without you. The career, the reputation, the family name. I'll burn it all down if it means keeping you. You don't mean that. Watch me. He stood, pulling out his phone with grim determination. I'm calling a press conference, tonight. I'm going to tell everyone exactly what my father did to your family, what he's trying to do now. I'm exposing Victoria's blackmail, all of it. Fiona's eyes widened in horror. That will destroy your career. Then it's destroyed. I choose you, Fiona. Every single time, I choose you. Everett, please, I love you. The words burst out raw and desperate. I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you, and if staying with you costs me everything else, then that's the best trade I've ever made. She stared at him, tears streaming, mouth open in shock. You love me? How could I not? He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears. You're fierce and stubborn and kind. You make me want to be better than I am. You see past the judge to the man underneath, and I am not letting my father or anyone else take you away from me. This is insane. Probably. He smiled through his own tears. But I'm done being practical. I'm done protecting myself. I'd rather lose everything and have you than keep everything and lose you. Fiona pulled him down to her level, their faces inches apart. If you do this, there's no going back. Good. I don't want to go back. I only want forward. With you. The press conference was scheduled for 8 that evening at the federal courthouse steps. News crews assembled like vultures, sensing blood in the water. Federal Judge Kingsley calling an emergency statement was unprecedented. Fiona stood to the side, heart in her throat, watching Everett adjust his tie one final time. The gesture that usually signaled nervousness now looked like preparation for battle. You don't have to do this, she whispered, last-ditch attempt to save him from himself. His hand found hers, squeezed. Yes, I do. Marcus appeared at Everett's other side, face grim. This is career suicide, you know that. I know. Everett's voice was steady. But some things matter more than career. He stepped up to the podium. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. The crowd of reporters quieted, waiting. I've called you here tonight to address allegations that will likely surface regarding my recent marriage. Everett's courtroom voice carried across the crowd. But first, I need to talk about my father. Murmurs rippled through the assembled press. This wasn't what they'd expected. Harrison Kingsley is a respected attorney with a 40-year career built on defending corporate interests. What he hasn't built that career on is ethics. Everett pulled documents from his jacket. 7 years ago, his firm represented Kingsley Development in a construction dispute. The opposing party was James and Margaret Langley, my wife's parents. My father used legal maneuvering to bankrupt them, contributing to circumstances that ultimately led to their deaths. The crowd erupted. Questions flew. Everett raised his hand for silence. Today my father attempted to blackmail my wife into leaving me by threatening to expose our marriage as fraudulent unless she disappeared from my life. He offered her brother medical treatment in exchange for her silence and absence. His voice turned to steel. This is who Harrison Kingsley is. This is what he does to maintain his precious reputation. Fiona watched Harrison's face in the crowd, saw the color drain from it as his world imploded on live television. As for my marriage, yes, it began as a practical arrangement. Fiona needed financial stability to maintain custody of her brother. I needed distance from an ex-girlfriend who refused to accept our relationship was over. Everett's gaze found Fiona's, held. But somewhere between the contract and now, something changed. I fell in love with my wife. The admission broadcast to thousands made Fiona's knees weak. My father claims this discredits my position as a federal judge. Perhaps he's right. Perhaps entering into a marriage of convenience shows poor judgment. But I would make the same choice again. His voice softened. Because that choice brought me Fiona, brought me Jamie, brought me a family I didn't know I needed until they walked into my life. Judge Kingsley, a reporter called out, are you saying you committed marriage fraud? I'm saying I married someone to help them and ended up finding the person I was meant to spend my life with. If that's fraud, convict me. He straightened his shoulders. Effective immediately, I'm resigning from the federal bench. I'm cutting all ties with Kingsley Family Enterprises and the family trust. And I'm publicly denouncing my father's attempts to manipulate and destroy a woman whose only crime was needing help. The press corps exploded with questions. Everett ignored them, turning to where Harrison stood frozen. You taught me that reputation is everything, Father. That image matters more than truth. You were wrong. Everett's voice carried across the chaos. The only thing that matters is choosing the people you love and protecting them, even when it costs you everything else. He stepped away from the podium, walking directly to Fiona. The cameras tracked every step, capturing the moment he pulled her into his arms in front of the world. I meant every word, he whispered against her hair. You're worth everything I just lost. Fiona pulled back to look at him, this man who'd just destroyed his career for her. You're insane. You've mentioned that before. His smile was devastating. Does it change how you feel about me? She should probably be more concerned about their future, about how they'd survive without his income, about the scandal that would follow them. Instead, all she could think about was how fiercely he'd defended her, how completely he'd chosen her over everything else. I love you, she said, the words she'd been too scared to speak finally breaking free. I love you so much it terrifies me. His eyes blazed. Say it again. I love you, Everett Kingsley. Then come home with me. Let me prove I meant every word. His forehead touched hers. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you that you're worth more than any career could ever be. Around them, cameras clicked furiously. Tomorrow they'd be front-page news, their story dissected by strangers. But right now, in this moment, Fiona didn't care. She'd found her home in this impossible man who'd given up everything for her. Take me home, she whispered. And he did. Rain started falling as they drove home, soft at first, then building to a downpour that matched the chaos of emotions swirling through Fiona. She stole glances at Everett's profile, this man who'd just sacrificed everything for her, and felt something crack open in her chest. Stop thinking so loud, he murmured, hand finding hers across the console. I can't help it. Everett, what you did was necessary. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. I'm not sorry. You should be. Your career, your family, mean nothing without you. He pulled into their driveway, turned off the engine but didn't move. Rain hammered the roof, cocooning them in their own world. Fiona, look at me. She did. His dark eyes blazed with an intensity that stole her breath. I've spent years building walls, he said quietly. Convinced myself I was better off alone, that caring too much meant inevitable pain, and then you collapsed in that hospital corridor, and every wall I'd built just shattered. Everett, let me finish. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. You terrify me. The way I feel about you terrifies me. But I'm done running from it. Done pretending this is just an arrangement. Fiona's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. Completely. Irrevocably. His voice dropped to a rough whisper. And I need you to tell me you feel it too. That I didn't just destroy my entire life for something one-sided. The vulnerability in his expression undid her. This powerful man, reduced to hoping she felt the same impossible thing he did. You're an idiot, she whispered. His face fell. Fiona, an idiot for thinking you had to ask. She closed the distance between them, fingers gripping his shirt. I've been in love with you for weeks. Since you started reading bedtime stories to Jamie. Since you called me Tempest and meant it as a compliment. Since you looked at me like I was worth saving. His breath caught. Say it again. I love you. The words flowed easier now, truth she'd been holding back too long. I love you, Everett Kingsley, and it scares me to death, but I don't care anymore. He kissed her, not the chaste brush of lips from their courthouse wedding. This was hunger and desperation, and weeks of suppressed desire finally unleashed. His hand fisted in her hair, angling her head as his mouth claimed hers with devastating thoroughness. Fiona gasped against his lips, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until she forgot her own name. Forgot everything except the taste of him, the feel of his body pressing against hers across the console, the way his other hand gripped her waist like he was afraid she'd disappear. When they finally broke apart for air, both breathing hard, Everett pressed his forehead to hers. Inside, he growled. Now. They made it to the front door before he spun her against it, rain soaking them both as his mouth found hers again. This kiss was slower, deeper, a thorough exploration that made her knees weak. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, requesting entrance she eagerly granted. Fiona's fingers tangled in his wet hair, pulling him closer even though there was no space left between them. She could feel every hard plane of his body, the racing of his heart matching her own frantic rhythm. Keys, she managed, when he moved to kiss down her neck. Need keys. Everett made a frustrated sound but stepped back enough for her to fumble the door open. They stumbled inside, lips reconnecting immediately. He kicked the door shut, pressing her against the wall in the entryway. We should... His mouth traced her jaw. Jamie... Sleepover. She gasped as his teeth grazed her pulse point. Won't be home until tomorrow. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Fiona? Her name was a warning, a question, a plea. Bedroom, she whispered. Take me to bed, Everett. He swept her into his arms without hesitation, carrying her up the stairs with single-minded purpose. In the bedroom doorway he paused, eyes searching hers. If we do this, we're already doing this. She cupped his face, thumbs brushing his sharp cheekbones. We've been doing this since the moment you caught me falling. I'm yours, Everett. Completely. His control shattered. He carried her to the bed, laying her down with reverent care that contradicted the fire in his eyes. Fiona pulled him down to her, and when their lips met again, it felt like coming home. Outside, rain continued falling. But inside, they finally stopped fighting the inevitable. Everett's hands trembled as he traced the curve of Fiona's face in the dim bedroom light. This moment felt sacred, fragile, like something that could shatter if he moved too quickly. We don't have to rush, he whispered, though his body screamed otherwise. Fiona's fingers worked the buttons of his soaked shirt. I'm not rushing. I'm choosing. Each button released sent heat pooling low in his stomach. I'm choosing you, Everett. All of you. The shirt fell away. Her hands explored his chest, mapping every plane and angle with reverent touches that made him shudder. When her fingers traced a scar near his ribs, old injury from college football, he caught her wrist. Your turn, he murmured, voice rough with barely contained desire. She nodded, trust shining in her honey eyes. Everett's fingers found the hem of her sweater, pausing for permission. When she lifted her arms, he pulled it over her head slowly, savoring each inch of skin revealed. Beautiful, he breathed, hands spanning her waist. You're so damn beautiful, Tempest. She blushed, and he kissed the color spreading across her chest, her collarbone, the hollow of her throat where her pulse raced. Her gasp when his lips found the sensitive spot behind her ear made him smile against her skin. Everett. His name on her lips was prayer and demand. "I'm here." He guided her back onto the bed, covering her body with his. The feel of her beneath him, soft and warm, and finally his, made his head spin. "I'm right here." Their remaining clothes disappeared in a blur of fumbling hands and breathless laughter when his belt refused to cooperate. The moment of levity eased the tension, making everything feel more real, more right. When nothing separated them anymore, Everett paused, drinking in the sight of her. Fiona's hair spread across his pillow, her skin flushed, eyes dark with desire and something deeper. Love, trust, surrender. "I love you," he said, needing her to know this meant everything. "Show me." She pulled him down, lips finding his. "Show me, Everett." He did, slowly, carefully, watching her face for every reaction. When they finally joined, moving together in perfect rhythm, it felt like pieces of himself he didn't know were missing, suddenly clicking into place. Fiona's fingers dug into his shoulders as he moved, her soft sounds of pleasure the sweetest music he'd ever heard. He kissed away the tears that leaked from her eyes, understood they were joy and release and overwhelming emotion rather than sadness. "Don't stop," she whispered. "Please don't stop." "Never." He kissed her deeply, swallowing her gasp as pleasure built between them. "Never stopping, Tempest." "You're mine now." When they shattered together, it was with whispered declarations of love and clutching embraces. Everett held her through the aftershocks, pressing kisses to her temple, her cheeks, anywhere he could reach. After, they lay tangled together, hearts still racing. Fiona traced lazy patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. "No going back now," she murmured. "Good." He tilted her chin up, kissing her softly. "I don't want to go back. Only forward." Morning light found them still entwined. Fiona woke to Everett watching her, expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi yourself." He kissed her forehead. "Sleep well." "Best sleep of my life." She stretched against him, smiling when his breath hitched. "You?" "Didn't sleep much. Too busy memorizing every detail." They made love again as dawn broke, slower this time, savoring every touch and kiss. Later, wrapped in his shirt while he made coffee in just his pants, Fiona's phone rang. Dr. Patel's name flashed on the screen. "Ms. Langley, I have excellent news. We have a surgery slot opening up next week. If Jamie's latest tests look good, we can proceed with the procedure." Fiona's hand flew to her mouth. "Really? You're sure?" "Completely. The treatment Everett arranged funding for is ready to go." Dr. Patel's warmth carried through the phone. "Your brother is going to be fine." When she hung up, tears streaming down her face, Everett was there, always there. "He's going to be okay," she sobbed into his chest. "Jamie's going to be okay." "I know, love." He held her tight. "I told you. I promised to keep you both safe." And he had. This impossible man had kept every promise. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Fiona sat rigid in the plastic chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Jamie had been in surgery for 3 hours. 3 hours of her imagination conjuring every possible catastrophe. Everett's hand covered both of hers, warm and steady. He hadn't left her side since they'd arrived at 4 that morning, hadn't complained when she'd squeezed his fingers hard enough to leave marks during the moment they wheeled Jamie away. "Breathe, Tempest," he murmured now, thumb tracing soothing circles on her wrist. "Hi's going to be fine. You don't know that." Her voice cracked. "What if something goes wrong? What if... Then we handle it, together." He pulled her against his side, and she went willingly, burying her face in his shoulder. "But he's strong, Fiona, just like his sister. He's going to pull through this." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe. The past week had been a whirlwind. Jamie's excitement about the surgery mixed with his fear. Everett reading extra bedtime stories to calm the boy's nerves. The three of them curled on the couch, pretending to watch movies, while really just holding on to each other. Last night, Jamie had asked if Everett would still be around after the surgery. "You're not going anywhere, right?" The 10-year-old's voice had been small, vulnerable. "Even though you're not really my... I mean because you and Fiona got married for the papers and stuff." Everett had knelt in front of Jamie's bed, taking the boy's small hands in his larger ones. "I'm not going anywhere. Ever. You're stuck with me now, kid. Promise?" "I promise. You're my family, Jamie, both of you, and I take care of my family." The memory made fresh tears spill down Fiona's cheeks. Everett kissed the top of her head, holding her tighter. Hours blurred together. Everett disappeared periodically to bring her coffee she didn't drink, food she couldn't eat. He answered texts from Marcus and other colleagues checking in, handled the logistics of their suddenly complicated lives with quiet efficiency. When she finally dozed against his shoulder from sheer exhaustion, he shifted to make her more comfortable without waking her. "Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley?" Fiona jerked awake at Dr. Patel's voice. She was on her feet before her eyes fully focused, Everett's steadying hand at her back the only thing keeping her upright. "How is he?" The question came out strangled. Dr. Patel's smile was radiant. "The surgery was a complete success. We repaired the defect, and his heart is already showing improved function. He's in recovery now, still sleeping off the anesthesia, but all his vitals are strong." Fiona's knees gave out. Everett caught her, arms banding around her waist as sobs tore from her throat. Relief and joy and overwhelming gratitude all mixed together. "He's okay," she gasped. "He's really okay. He's going to need monitoring and follow-up appointments. But yes, your brother is going to be fine, Mrs. Kingsley. He's going to live a normal, healthy life." The words she'd been terrified she'd never hear. Fiona turned in Everett's arms, buried her face in his chest, and let herself fall apart. He held her through it, whispering reassurances, pressing kisses to her hair. "Told you," he murmured when her sobs quieted to hiccups. "Told you he'd be fine. You were right." She pulled back to look at him, saw her own tears reflected in his eyes. "About everything. About us, about choosing each other, about—" He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Come on, let's go see our boy. Our boy." The casual possessiveness in his words made her heart swell. Jamie looked small in the hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily around him, but his color was better than Fiona had seen in months, and when his eyes fluttered open an hour later, his smile was pure sunshine. "Hey, Fee," he whispered. "Did it work?" "It worked, baby." She gripped his hand carefully, mindful of the IVs. "You're going to be okay." "Cool." His gaze shifted to Everett standing on the other side of the bed. "You stayed?" "Of course I stayed." Everett's voice was rough with emotion. "Told you I'm not going anywhere." Jamie's smile widened. "Good. Because I was thinking after I'm all better maybe you could teach me how to drive. I know I'm only 10, but in the driveway or something. Fiona's a terrible driver, so—" "I am not," Fiona protested, laughing through tears. "You hit a mailbox last week, Fee. That mailbox came out of nowhere." Everett's laugh rumbled deep in his chest, the sound of pure joy. He reached across the bed to take Fiona's free hand, completing their circle. "We'll work on the driving lessons," he said, squeezing Fiona's fingers. "After you recover, and after I teach your sister how to properly use mirrors." "Traitor," Fiona muttered, but she was smiling. This was everything. Her brother alive and healing, the man she loved by her side, a future spreading before them full of possibility instead of fear. They'd survived the storm. Now it was time to enjoy the calm. 6 months later, autumn returned to paint the world in gold and crimson. Fiona stood in the garden she'd expanded since spring, one hand resting on her rounded belly, while the other dead-headed roses that refused to stop blooming despite the cooling weather. "You're supposed to be resting," Everett's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and exasperation in equal measure. "I am resting, very restfully pruning." She turned to face her husband, taking in the sight of him in jeans and a Henley instead of his usual suits. No more courtroom armor needed. He'd started teaching constitutional law at the university, a position that suited him far better than the bench ever had. Besides, the doctor said light activity is fine. Light activity is walking, not gardening in heels. Fiona glanced down at her feet. "They're kitten heels. Barely counts. You're impossible." But he was smiling as he crossed the lawn, pulling her into his arms with careful attention to her belly. "How are my girls today? Your daughter has been using my ribs as a soccer goal." Fiona pressed his hand to where the baby was currently kicking. "Feel that?" Wonder crossed Everett's face as he felt their daughter move. It never got old, watching this powerful man turn soft over a baby that hadn't even been born yet. "Strong kick," he murmured. "Takes after her mother. God help us both if she inherits my stubbornness and your control issues. She'll be perfect." He kissed Fiona's forehead, then her nose, then her lips. Just like her mother. A bark interrupted the moment. Max, the golden retriever Everett had surprised them with 3 months ago, bounded across the yard with Jamie in hot pursuit. The boy had grown 2 inches since his surgery, filled out with healthy muscle, and smiled more in a day than he used to in a week. "Everett, watch this." Jamie threw a frisbee with impressive accuracy. Max caught it mid-air, landing with a graceful twist. "Did you see? He's getting so good." "I saw, buddy. Excellent throw." Everett's arm stayed around Fiona's waist, thumb tracing absent circles on her hip. 5 more minutes, then inside for homework. Jamie groaned but nodded, racing off with Max. "You're good at this," Fiona said quietly. "Being a father." "I'm learning." His expression turned serious. "Speaking of which, I have something to ask you. If it's about names again, I already told you we're not naming her after a Supreme Court justice." "Not about names." He stepped back, and Fiona's breath caught when he dropped to one knee in the garden where they'd had their first real conversation. "Everett, what? Let me do this properly." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. 6 months ago, I married you in a courthouse with a ring that represented a contract, a means to an end. And somewhere between that ceremony and now, everything changed. Tears already blurred Fiona's vision. "You don't have to." "I do." He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the sunset, a simple band with small diamonds that looked nothing like the flashy engagement ring he'd given her for show. "This isn't about contracts or arrangements or solving problems. This is about you and me and the life we've built. Everett, Fiona Langley Kingsley, will you marry me? For real this time. Not because we need to, but because I love you more than I thought possible to love another person. Because you make me better. Because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life coming home to you and our growing family. We're already married, you impossible man." But she was laughing through tears, heart so full it hurt. "I know, but I want to do it right. Want you to have a proposal that matters. A ring that means something." He took her hand, thumb brushing across the simple wedding band she'd worn since their courthouse ceremony. "Want you to know that if I had to do it all over again, I'd still choose you. Every single time." "Yes." The word came out choked. "Yes, of course, yes. I'd marry you 1,000 times. He slipped the new ring onto her finger beside the old one, then stood and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Fiona cupped his face. "I already married you for real," she whispered. "The moment you caught me falling, the moment you chose me over everything else. That courthouse ceremony might have been practical, but my heart made vows that day that had nothing to do with contracts." "I know." His smile was radiant. "Mine did too. Just took me a while to admit it." Jamie's whoop made them both turn. The boy was jumping up and down, Max barking excitedly beside him. "Does this mean we get to have another wedding? With cake?" "Definitely cake," Everett confirmed, pulling Fiona close. "And dancing. And your sister officiating from your arms, since she'll be born by then. Can Max be the ring bearer?" "Absolutely." Fiona looked around at her life, her healthy brother, her devoted husband, the baby growing inside her, the home they'd built from broken pieces and impossible choices. This wasn't the life she'd planned. It was so much better. "I love you," she said for the 1,000th time, and somehow still not enough. "I love you too, Tempest." Everett's hand splayed across her belly, protective and possessive. "Both of you. All of us." As the sun set over their garden, painting everything in shades of gold and promise, Fiona leaned into her husband's embrace and smiled. She'd fallen into the arms of a stranger in a hospital corridor, drowning in circumstances beyond her control, and he'd caught her, not just her body, but her heart, her future, her whole world. Some falls, she'd learned, led to the most beautiful landings. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.